The world is quiet at this hour. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you feel like something's been left unsaid. You wake up, you stretch, you check your phone, you drink water, you start the day. But it's not really a beginning, is it? It's a continuation of yesterday's rhythm, of last week's routine, of something you didn't choose, but now find yourself repeating. And beneath that repetition, there's a question you don't want to ask, because you already know the answer. Why am I doing this? What does any of it actually mean? Not in the big, dramatic, philosophical way, but in the ordinary sense. You go through the motions, you try to be good, you try to stay ahead, but still, something in you whispers, this doesn't feel like living. Albert Camus called that moment the absurd. It's not a theory, it's a feeling, a realization that we are creatures wired for meaning, longing for order, clarity, purpose. But the world remains silent. You ask, why am I here? And the universe offers no reply. Camus says this confrontation between your need to understand and the world's refusal to explain is the absurd. It's the collision between the human heart and an indifferent cosmos. The ache for meaning, meeting the void. And that void isn't loud, it's subtle. It shows up in the smallest places, in a quiet bus ride, in a blinking cursor, in the silence after someone asks you, "How are you?" And you don't know what to say. The absurd doesn't scream, it just waits. Until one day you realize you're no longer just tired, you're exhausted by the weight of not knowing why. Camus doesn't think this moment is a tragedy. He thinks it's the beginning. Because to see the absurd clearly, to look into the silence and not look away, is to be fully, painfully awake. And once you're awake, you have a choice. You could run, you could numb it, you could pretend it isn't there. Distract yourself with money, love, religion, work, pleasure. Try to fill the silence with sound. But Camus calls this philosophical suicide, the act of closing your eyes again, of inventing meaning just to ease the ache, of lying to yourself beautifully. And he asks, what if you didn't run? What if you lived with the silence and didn't try to fix it? What if you made peace with the fact that life has no meaning beyond what you create, that there is no answer coming, but you can still live fully inside the question? To explain how we might live with the absurd, Camus turned to a myth, a story older than memory, a man, a mountain, a rock that never stays where it's placed. You've probably heard it before. Sisyphus, condemned by the gods for defying them, was sentenced to an eternal punishment, to push a massive boulder up a hill. And every time he reached the top, the stone would roll back down again and again, forever. On the surface, it sounds like torture, a cycle of failure, an endless loop with no escape. And that's exactly the point. But Camus didn't see tragedy in this story. He saw something else. He didn't focus on the stone or the climb, or even the moment it fell. He focused on what came next. The descent. That quiet walk back down the mountain. The moment after the failure, before the next attempt begins. Because in that moment, Sisyphus is alone with himself. There's no performance, no struggle, just awareness. He knows the task is pointless. He knows the stone will fall, and yet, he walks back anyway. Camus calls this the most human moment of all, not because Sisyphus escapes, but because he doesn't need to. He doesn't lie to himself. He doesn't imagine the gods will forgive him. He doesn't pretend the next climb will be different. He accepts the absurdity completely and still chooses to return to the stone, not out of obedience, not out of hope, but out of something else entirely. Rebellion, the quiet kind, the kind where you see the truth and continue anyway, not because it's meaningful, but because you decided to do it anyway. Camus writes, "There is no fate that cannot be surmounted by scorn." He means, even if your life is repetitive, even if the outcome is certain, even if you're tired, you can still own it. You can still say, yes, this is my mountain, this is my stone, and I will push it on my terms. Camus calls Sisyphus an absurd hero because he doesn't need freedom to be free. He doesn't need hope to keep going. He walks back down the hill with full awareness and chooses to begin again. And Camus ends his essay with one final line, a line that has confused and inspired generations. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. Happy, not because he's smiling, not because he found meaning, but because he made peace with meaning's absence and chose to live anyway. You may not be cursed by ancient gods, but you still carry something, a task, a routine, a pressure that always seems to reset itself. Wake up, scroll, answer, work, eat, check, sleep, repeat. Another Monday, another inbox, another calendar full of obligations that never seem to end. The stone may not be made of marble, but it's real. It weighs on your chest. It follows you home. It whispers at night. You finish one task, and another appears. You solve one problem, and 3 more arrive. The top of the hill never comes, and deep down, you know it. That's the modern absurd, not the grand tragedies, but the quiet erosion of spirit in the face of constant motion that never leads anywhere new. Camus recognized this. He wrote, "The workman of today works every day in his life at the same tasks, and this fate is no less absurd. The repetition of labor, of performance, of surviving in a system that demands you run, but never asks where you're going. And the danger isn't just exhaustion. It's forgetting that you're even carrying the stone, losing awareness, numbing out, becoming a machine with a human face." But Camus offers something different. He doesn't tell you to escape. He doesn't tell you to quit. He tells you to wake up, to see the repetition, and still choose to walk, to reclaim the rhythm as your own. Not because the world changed, but because you did. When you realize the mountain isn't going away, that the systems, the pressure, the noise may always be there, you gain the chance to ask, how will I respond? Will I let the stone define me? Will I push it in bitterness? Or will I walk with intention, with awareness, with presence? Camus isn't asking you to love the burden. He's asking you to own it, to stop pretending it's someone else's, to stop waiting for someone to come and carry it for you, to stop believing that meaning will one day descend from the sky, because it won't. But that's not a tragedy, that's freedom. When you stop demanding the world explain itself, you begin to listen to what it's quietly offering you. Your breath, your body, your ability to choose, even in the smallest things. The way you make your tea, the way you say someone's name, the way you begin again. Not because you have to, but because you chose to. Even if it changes nothing, it changes everything. Camus said that once you fully face the absurd and stop trying to run from it, what's left is revolt, not rebellion with noise, not protest with slogans, but something quieter, something deeper, the decision to keep living, even when life refuses to explain itself. That's revolt. To wake up knowing your work may be erased, that your love might not be returned, that your kindness might go unnoticed, and still, to give, to love, to try. Anyway, from revolt comes freedom, because when you stop needing life to justify itself, you stop waiting. You stop begging the universe to hand you meaning. You realize it never will, and strangely, that's when you become free. Not because life became easier, but because you stopped asking it to be different. And in that freedom, you find passion. Not adrenaline, but intensity. The kind of presence that turns ordinary moments into sacred ones. The way you walk, the way you listen, the way you choose again and again to begin, even when the stone is waiting, especially then, because you are not here to reach the top, you are here to climb, and when the stone falls again, as it always will, you smile, you breathe, and you walk back down, not defeated, but alive. You are Sisyphus, and one must imagine you not just happy, but free.